Hey, everybody. How's it going? And welcome to the NYU Game Center lecture series. Tonight, we're extremely excited to have Victoria Tran, who is the community director at Innersloth, creators of Among Us. Before we get started, a quick shout out to our sponsors who make the lecture series possible and all of our events here at the NYU Game Center. We have Fresh Planet, one of the coolest game studios in New York City. Got Take-Two Interactive, proving that a giant, super successful corporate game publisher also can have a heart and care about indie games and students. They support us, they do scholarships, they help this event series. They're terrific. We have the Empire State Development, which is your tax dollars at work. So thank you to New York State government, and thank you to all of you who pay taxes. and we have Parsec, which is, for my money, the absolute best way to share live games between people, to host games and invite them and share them across different players. We use it a lot for play testing and for classes. Parsec is a terrific kind of magical tech solution for a really hard problem, which is especially important for us here teaching games and studying games. So we love all our sponsors. Thanks for helping make this possible. So tonight we are going to be talking to Victoria Tran. Victoria is the community director at Innersloth. And before that, she worked at Kitfox, very cool game studio, working on stuff like Boyfriend Dungeon, the Dwarf Fortress, a bunch of cool games there. She also helps organize Game Colour MTL, which amplifies and supports the voices of game developers of color in Canada. And she is, in general, just an amazing thinker who is working on the issues of how to cultivate and grow and support compassionate, safe, friendly communities around games, which is something that's really important and challenging, and something that we think a lot about. If there are any things that our students are interested in, it's one, how to make games like Among Us that can be both original and cool and fun and also super successful, and then also how to think about issues of inclusion and support and compassion in communities around games. So we're super excited to welcome Victoria and hear what she has to say. She's going to talk a little bit about her job and what she does and what that entails. And then we're going to have a little conversation between the two of us. And then we're going to open up for questions from all of you. So please be thinking of questions that you want to ask Victoria and post them in the chat. We'll be scanning the chat. Logan and I will be pulling out the good questions. Don't bother Victoria about update information about updates to Among Us. She's not here to give you exclusive update information, but ask her about, her job and what she does and how she does what she does and what it's like to wrangle the millions and millions and millions of people who are part of this community that she's responsible for helping support. So please join me in welcoming Victoria Tran.
Hello. Hello, I am super excited to be here. Let me do the thing where I talk about sharing my screen and see if I can actually do it properly. Such is the life of 2021. Yep, 2021. That's what we're doing. Okay, hello everyone. I am super excited to be here. Nervous, excited, all the fun stuff. But yeah, so really I'm going to be talking about what I do in my job, because I realize, especially when it comes to community management and just community work in general, there's a lot of flip-flopping, not a lot of like concrete info on it, right? So I'm going to be here to talk about it. And as a very quick intro, even though Frank already did one, so I'll just breeze past this. I'm Victoria, community director at Innersloth, Make Among Us, previously Kitfox Games, as he said, working on Boyfriend Dungeon, Dwarf Fortress, Pupperazzi. Also, you can find me on Twitter at the Tran. If at any point afterwards you're like, I still have questions, or I actually, no, that's, I mean, I don't know, maybe you want to keep up with my shenanigans, then you can find me on Twitter. Please do. So this is kind of what I'll be going through, just as like a very brief overview of what what I'll be doing, and what I actually do like during the day, and also kind of the problems that I face. Oops, you can see my presenter notes. That's embarrassing. Okay, so anyways, so yeah, I'll be talking about kind of the background of Among Us, what I do, and any problems that I see. Yeah, and you know what? I actually meant to put the speaker notes in front of my slides, because that was my way of testing you that you were paying attention. So good job, everyone. I'm really proud of you for just passing. You did it. So first thing first, background, going to talk about a little bit about like how Among Us kind of came to be in terms of popularity, because that would be probably kind of useful to know. And as you know, we go into talking about the community a little bit more, how this all kind of blew up, because it's a very unique story, that's for sure. So super quick rundown, right? So first, it released in June 2018, and it was local only, mobile only, and throughout like kind of the months moving forward, they did things like added online multiplayer, they ported it to Steam and itch.io, and they basically like, you know, added more maps, they started improving the game. It was definitely something where they just kept improving upon it. And the thing is that a lot of people were like, oh, it just very suddenly blew up. But it did actually kind of have some overseas popularity in Korea and Brazil. So it wasn't necessarily just out of the blue. It's one of those interesting things where like, because I assume most of us are based in North America, let's say, that oftentimes we miss out on a lot of games that are maybe more popular overseas. And then when it finally comes to North America, we're like, wow, where did it come from? So there was that. And then, of course, streamers were a big reason why Among Us kind of got bigger. They suspect that a Korean streamer actually found it on the front page of itch.io at one point, and then that kind of rolled on there until Brazil. And then as the numbers kept increasing, Steam was like, oh, like here's a game. Would you be interested in doing a daily deal? And Innersloth said yes. And that daily deal was actually a really good sale for them in February 2020. Not only did they make quite a bit of sales on it, like considering the game and its wish list, but they also grew the wish list a lot, so that when the Steam summer sale came around, they sold a bunch of copies. You know, 2020 happened and is still kind of happening right now. And then you got into July and August. And this was basically when Among Us really picked up steam and, you know, got popular in North America, let's say, and people started paying a little bit more attention to it. And then that rolled into like September, October, November being very big months for Among Us until we hit 500,000 million monthly active users in November. And this was a little bit before this was when I was brought on to the team. So literally I was thrown into a very big community all at once. And that was a lot, but I will be talking about that a little bit more in a second. First, I just want to really quickly go over some recent stats, just because I assume this would be helpful for you and maybe interesting. But to get a sense of the community, right? So in Twitch Q4 2020, we had over 1 billion viewing sessions. YouTube had more than 4 billion viewing sessions or views on YouTube videos. And we are currently getting around 1 million new users per day, roughly around that. It changes. And in January 2021, we averaged around 300 million monthly active users. So less than 500 million, but still a lot, still a lot to deal with, right? So yeah, that is basically kind of where the community is at right now, or at least the most recent stats that I gathered for this. So then what do I exactly do when it comes to community managing? What is a community director? Why is that my title? All that kind of stuff. So no matter what the community title is, right? Because I think community manager jobs vary depending on how big your studio is. Are you AAA? Are you indie? How many games do you have? Where in the production cycle is your game? What kind of game do you make? What are your values, etc. Even within community managers themselves, the job can vary quite a bit. So no matter what, I do kind of think that the through line through that is that for any community job, we want to create intentional spaces for our community and game fans to live in, two, to nurture positive connections between the developers, but also to help nurture those positive connections between players themselves, and three, to maintain these relationships, right? So it's not just, cool, you release a game, I'm gone, goodbye. You want to ideally have them be a part of your community and, you know, hopefully have them be a part of your community for a long time coming, whether or not you have a game like Among Us that hopefully, you know, has sustained player base, or if you move on to a new game, like that you have fans that are interested in your new game. So that's kind of like the role that a community person would do, right? So to get more into the specifics of what I exactly do, split up into a lot of things. And of course, like as we go into like the Q&A section, we can talk more about specifics depending on what questions you have. But first of all, what most people would probably know my work for, or a lot of community managers work for, is content creation and social media management. Technically, social media management is its own other job, but again, due to indie, it's kind of mixed up. And for a little bit of context, Innersloth itself is only 5 people currently, and I'm the only outward-facing communications person. I think that's sort of inward-facing, that I'm basically the one that handles a lot of the community work, obviously. So then there's also moderation. Of course, we have a Discord. At the time of me joining Innersloth, we had a Discord of almost 800,000 people. I have cut it down to 300,000 people, but that is also another story for another time. But obviously, like, even though, like, you know, we have a lot of lovely moderators that I would die for, I still am usually doing some moderation myself. Customer support, that's sort of inevitable with the social media management. We do work with a partner that helps us with like actual like player support. So thankfully I'm not answering like hundreds and hundreds of like emails per day. And then, of course, really going into engagement. So whether that is with content creation, whether that is with the game itself, really measuring the impressions that we have, the growth that we have, and most importantly for me, all the engagement that we have. So when I talk about engagement, you know, that's like likes, comments, people interacting with us, whether that is on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, anywhere. There's also a lot of strategy and planning and listening that comes with kind of community management work. So oftentimes I'm basically listening to what people are talking about. And this seems a little bit easy until you realize like the sheer volume of feedback that you get. And then you have to basically be able to parse it down, narrow it down to being like, what is the top thing that some people are concerned about, second, third, fourth, and also like which ones are actually doable and which ones are kind of just people throwing out something and being like, hope that works. And then honestly, a little bit of it is being just kind of the spokesperson. Again, because I'm the outward facing voice for Innersloth, it means that I do have to end up being like the person that speaks for Innersloth, that speaks for the devs sometimes as the, you know, the official Innersloth account. Very quickly, I'm going to go over like external, like other jobs that I have. Again, none of this is really a community manager's job, but small indie team usually end up doing it, right? We do work with a bunch of lovely partners. Robot Teddy and Dual Wield Studio help us out with biz dev and merch respectively. So I'm usually involved in that because, again, we need a lot of things approved. We need a lot of things done. So if there's any marketing needs that we have, I'm usually a part of it. Press, whether that's interviews or people asking questions or needing something from us, I'm usually handling that. Influencer relations. We don't necessarily do anything like directly with influencers. That being said, I'm the one keeping track of who's playing our game, what they're saying about it, and usually, honestly, if like a big influencer is playing our game, I'm usually getting like bombarded with tweets about it. So there's that. Event coordination, so things like when we have Twitch revivals or when people want to do tournaments with us, like I'm usually involved with that again, and merchandising, where Amy, who is another person who works at Innersloth, is mainly handling that. But sometimes as we drop new merch or if we need to communicate something, I'm also a part of that. Then, sorry, this is like, again, this is why it is so hard to tell someone what I do in a day, because the amount of jobs that you sort of have when you work in community and communications can be so varied. Then I have like all my internal jobs, let's say, right? So not only am I speaking as the devs outwards, I'm also taking the feedback and bringing it inwards to the development team, right? So one, as I said, community feedback, seeing what people are talking about, seeing what they're happy about, seeing what they're unhappy about, and kind of stripping away a lot of like the, let's say, negative emotion that you can get from a lot of feedback. Just not even like people actually that angry, but kind of just that's the only way they know how to express it. Stripping that emotion away and kind of giving it as actual actionable feedback, to providing any data that they might need. There's a lot of analytics tools and analytics that I go into, whether that is like Twitter, again, all the social media channels, they have the demographics, they have all the stats that you might need. I'll advise on any outward communications that we need to do. So I'm writing up the dev logs, I'm writing up any communications that needs to go out. That's all under my umbrella. And finally, a little bit of bug reporting, just because obviously, again, because of the way that social media works and Discord works, you often hear about a lot of things that go on. And finally, swear, and finally we get into the community director things. And this is kind of the more high level things, right? So I understand team of 5, I don't technically have someone working under me. Why do I have the community director role? And this is because I'm often handling things that are, again, out of the scope, let's say, of a typical community manager job. So any partner relations we have with major console platforms, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, like the actual staff, I'm usually talking to them. Do we want to be on their platform? Do we want to do anything with their platform? If something is happening, how are we talking about it? What's the timing going to be like? What's the strategy? What do we want to sound like? That sort of thing. Definitely going through a lot of approvals. So if you are hearing from the Among Us game in any official capacity, if they have asked, it's usually I've usually already seen it, right? So for example, for like the tweet you saw before with Xbox, like that was a thing that I saw before they tweeted out, because we just needed to make sure that we were coordinated on everything. And then a lot of influence over brand values and voice. This is something that I'm very grateful for to the Innersloth team for letting me do. But basically, I really got to decide how I wanted Among Us to sound, how I wanted the brand, I guess, to talk to the community, and how we will sound like when we are working with other partners and all of that. And finally, a lot of community design priorities and strategies. So obviously, Among Us is a game that is heavily based around community, and that's our highest priority, to just make sure our community is happy and to put their needs first. So when it comes to like, okay, what are we going to work on the game next, or what are we going to do with the game? Like, what updates do we need? I'm often kind of strategizing with them and kind of designing things with them. So for example, moderation and reporting is one of the biggest things that we need and want in the game. So when we're creating like the moderation system and the accounts, I'm talking to them too about like, okay, so this is what we need for a proper moderation system. These are things that are reportable, bannable offenses. This is when something should be seen by a human being and not handled by a bot, all that kind of thing. So basically, it's a really hard time to kind of plot out what I do in a day. I was trying to do it like during the day. I tried to plot it out in this one like line here. It was not working out, right? So because there's just so many things that kind of intersect and work with each other that it's really hard to just like be like, oh, this is a typical day in the life. And the thing is like when you see this isn't the complete thing, right? This isn't everything that happens, because as you know, especially with a very big game, things will go wrong, right? There will be a fire somewhere, Discord will go down, AOC will suddenly tweet that she's streaming your game and you're like, it's 8 p.m. on a Friday night, I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe you wake up just this Tuesday and you're like, I'm ready to write a devlog, and you wake up and instead everyone's like, hey, your servers are overloaded, fix it. And I'm like, oh, no one's awake except for me. Okay. I'm going to just talk to everyone and make sure they know that everything's okay. So this is kind of the thing that again, why community work is a little difficult to explain, because there are a lot of little emergencies that you can't always talk about either, right? And sometimes it's just nice to be around. Like if a community event is happening, like maybe in the Discord or something, you just want to pop in and you're like, I'm here, and it's a friendly face and it's nice to be there. And that's not necessarily like a problem, but this is why like kind of it is more difficult, I think, for a lot of community managers, community devs to kind of set their times. And that is a very important thing. So with all that being said, here are a little bit more of the problems that I need to handle and that I found as I was diving into this. So big problem was the fact that it was an unexpected explosion of popularity. I mean, we're grateful, and obviously there's like, this is amazing and wonderful and wouldn't change anything. But it is definitely one thing to be, working on a game and being like, yeah, it's popular, like this is great, like we'll continue working on it. And it's another thing in the case of Among Us, where in January 2020, the Innersloth team was like, we're done working on this game. We're not going to work on it anymore. We're going to move on to something completely different. And then suddenly, late 2020, your game just blows up. So honestly, it's great, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, suddenly all these gears had to shift. They had to, help hire on partners to help out with like legal things, with business practices. They hired on me to help with the community, and any updates and any work that gets done, like even a tiny tweak could mean that suddenly millions of people can't play your game because a server is overloaded or something goes like wrong. And this is why it's a little bit more difficult, I think, and a problem that I have also faced. So related to this is the problem with scale. There are so many people in the community, again, which I'm thankful for, but in the case of, for example, when I first joined the Discord and it had its 800K people, regularly bots would just break. They just would stop working. Or if I tried to create a role, and when I was trying to like clean up everything, I would like create roles and like, fix things, it would cause a server outage and I wouldn't be able to work on the Discord for like a few minutes because Discord was like, nope, it noped out of there. So things of like scale of just like, the mass amounts of people who will see when you make a mistake is definitely a thing that I found in the community and, within the game itself. So a little bit terrifying. And then you go into kind of the saturation. So the interesting thing about Among Us, right, is that it has reached a level in pop culture that even people who don't play the game kind of know about the game. Again, very cool. Not a position I expected to be in. That being said, it's like it brings with it its own problems, right? So some people I know literally will have their notifications turned on for the Twitter account to be like, ooh, they tweeted, let's insult them. Very strange. You definitely get just basically a part of the internet where it's like, it's fun to make fun of something. And I think that was like a very interesting problem to discover. And again, as I pose these problems, like I'm not necessarily saying I have complete solutions to them. I'm working on them and I'm figuring it out, but it's important, I think, to say that like, I don't have all the answers, and it's very difficult for anyone to have all of the answers. If you have all the answers, please let me know. And then of course we have time. Time is really difficult with a team of 5 and hopefully, hiring more, but that in itself is its own problem. But I'm often like, juggling several different things. And for me, like one of the most important things, especially when it comes to like the Discord, let's say, is that being there for someone when something is going wrong is going to always take priority over like, I need to make content for TikTok. I need to make content for this. But at the same time, I still need to do that part of my job too. So it's a lot of like juggling for sure. And I really want to bring up mental health. I think a lot of community managers, community developers, community directors, whatever it is, and game devs in general, honestly. Like, it is very important to think about mental health and to try and prioritize it, even though it could be quite difficult. That being said, like, I have my bad days, I have my good days. It's good to be honest about it. And the final thing that I want to talk about before we kind of get into like Q&A and everything is just the values part. So I do, as Frank said in his introduction, I do talk a lot about creating kinder communities, creating better communities, and wanting to create these positive spaces. And that being said, I understand that those sound like very big, like lofty goals, and they're not practical, and it's not going to work, and you're just fighting a losing battle. But that being said, it's still my priority, and it's not a problem necessarily, but it is like an interesting problem of like, okay, can this actually be sustainable to scale? It was one thing when I was working on it at Kitfox, which, had a smaller community than Among Us, still like significant, but smaller than Among Us. So what practices can I take and what works in a grand scale, and how does that happen, and how can I make that sustainable, and how can I like rope in everyone else in the Among Us community to be a part of that? So it's something I think about a lot. Who knows how that's going to work? I think it's going well so far, hopefully, but we'll see as the updates roll in. And yeah, that is basically the end of my little like what I do in a day. And I guess Frank and I will be talking more, chit-chatting, answering questions. Hello, he's back.
Lovely, beautiful. Thank you. That was great. And yes. What's so nice, Victoria, to hear you talk about this stuff is just it's such a good example of the fact that video games are made by people. And I think, there are so many games that are the output of an extremely large process, which of course, they're always made by people, but there's a sense that we get this kind of disconnected sense when you have these really large corporations, these big sort of industrial size, enormous scale processes for producing and managing and maintaining this stuff. And it can really feel disconnected. And here, the way you describe, there's just a handful of people making this thing and maintaining this thing. It's sort of it's lovely, and it makes I just think it's a message. It's a powerful message about the capacity of just individuals in 2021. Just you and your friends hanging out. You can make a thing that then is a colossal globe-spanning pop culture phenomenon, right? You don't have to be Marvel. You don't have to be Nintendo. You don't have to own the license to Pokemon to make a thing that just becomes ubiquitous and just a part, just fabric of everyday culture. It's wonderful. It's great to hear it, and it's kind of there's a lightness to it. I just think it's really pleasing. So okay, so here's I have a bunch of questions, and then we get a bunch of great questions from the chat. But let me start out by asking, do you think that different games have different characters? Do you think the communities for different games have kind of different personalities? And if so, what's the personality of the community around Among Us?
Yeah, so I actually do think it's actually one of my favorite things, especially when I was working at Kitfox, because I was like working on 5 different games. The personalities of communities definitely have their own like little variations and their little quirks. Like there's like usually a through line between all of them, which is we love games. Great. But there's like little personality quirks to all of them. And I think what's really interesting about the Among Us one is just the amount of variation I see in it, right? Because of the way that like Among Us has hit pop culture, it's like I get children, I get teachers playing with their classes, I get politicians, I guess, the WWE playing it, sometimes like random comedians have like tweeted being like, we're going to play this game. I was like, oh, okay. Like hardcore streamers, really casual like streamers. It is, I think what is interesting about the Among Us community is the pure, like, I don't even know how to like put it, just the pure joy that they find in the game itself, and just like not even like, you know, necessarily the gameplay, but just the fact that they're all interacting with each other, right? Among Us is all about really just interacting with each other and having the game to, you know, help facilitate that. So that means that often the community itself is like very much like always chatting with each other, always kind of bouncing off each other's ideas. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, you know, you sometimes hear about different, like, okay, I'm just going to name names here. League of Legends gets kind of a bad rap for toxicity. And if you look at the mechanics of League of Legends, it's a team game. And I think a lot of the toxicity that game produces is actually, it's not in the competitive aspect, but it's internally within teams. You have people who maybe don't know each other well, trying to communicate in real time, criticizing each other because they're trying to solve problems in real time. And, you know, so above and beyond just the kind of natural problematic aspects of online behavior, the mechanics of League maybe produce some of the toxicity. Now, here's the ironic thing, or the puzzling thing. Among Us is a game about killing, lying, and betrayal. How does that not produce more toxicity? Because it seems like the kind of Among Us doesn't have the reputation of producing a lot of nasty kind of toxic behavior. And yet you would think that those mechanics might lend themselves to all kinds of problems. Do you have any insight into how you avoid this?
Totally. Yeah. And I'm not going to like sit and pretend like there hasn't been problems in the public lobbies in Among Us, right? Like that is something that I'm very aware of. And that is why it's like moderation and reporting was like the number one thing that Innersloth and I were like, we need to get this in and we need to make sure it's done properly. But that's actually part of it, right? Like you can have a game about killing, you can have a game about whatever. And the reason why like a moderation system or reporting system is so important, and why maybe it's like I put so much emphasis into it, is because those are like kind of the backbone of like, here's how we're going to tackle the brunt of it, right? Obviously, you'll have a code of conduct, you'll have rules, you'll have a ton of things to try and work together with this. But I don't think it's the mechanic of the games that does it. I have seen so many like lovely communities come from like quotation mark very violent games. It's when I think when you have an influence over an audience, you do have the responsibility to educate them and to try and push them towards a better way of interacting with each other, right? Whether that's through a code of conduct that you actually follow through on and that you actually believe in and that you display outwardly, which is again why like when I talk as Among Us on Twitter as on TikTok or whatever, it's like there's a very certain voice I'm using because, hey, like this is our values and this is what we really want our community to sound like, right? So part of it is from the devs themselves, from whatever code of conduct you have, whatever rule set you have, whatever moderation system you're going to hopefully input in soon, reporting system, that sort of thing. And also making the community understand like, hey, like these are things that are acceptable and not acceptable, and there will actually be consequences for it, right? A lot of the time, I think we see this a lot where it's like, hey, don't do that. And then because either someone is like, they make a lot of money for us, it's like nothing really happens. Or let's say like they're so ingrained in community, it's like, it's, you know, a little bit scary to like do more than just a slap on the wrist. I think that's when it becomes detrimental to the community, and that's when it becomes a little toxic, and that's when it looks hypocritical. Well, it is hypocritical, right? So that's kind of what I kind of think about when it comes to community. It's one, the dev setting the rules, the tone, the code of conduct, but also making sure that the community itself is intolerant to those kinds of things. Obviously, with huge games, you run into other problems, and you hope for the best and you try your best, but hopefully it all works out. And that's kind of where I think the toxicity community thing like kind of merges together.
Now, without pressing you for updates,
Yeah.
can you give us any insight into the process? So you've mentioned that you are working on moderation and reporting tools.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys are developing internally? Are you shopping around with like off-the-shelf systems? Is there any insight you can kind of give us into the design problem of the mod and reporting tools?
Totally. Yeah. So the thing about an account system, a reporting system, and one that is done well, or that I guess to a standard that we were okay with. One, like someone actually has to make it. And at the time when I had first joined, we had one programmer. So that was that was one thing where it's like, okay, that's a little bit of an issue, but that's all right. We hired another programmer. Anyways, so it's actually like someone has to make it. It has to be hosted on a server, and depending on the server, and because you have accounts, like, okay, so how are you going to make sure they're not hacked? How are you going to make sure they're secure? You will need a certain amount of personal info for, like these accounts to happen, and, for banning and reporting and moderation to actually happen. Are you obliging by all the legal laws that are, globally around? And then what is handled by a bot and what is handled by people, especially in a game about murdering and killing people. And like, there's a lot of nuance in the conversation. I try to stay away from a lot of just pure like robot AI. We've seen that with algorithms where like it just goes terribly wrong, or just it's off and it's weird. So we're working with partners to hopefully get like, eyes in front of a lot of the reports. And yeah, it's honestly, there's just so many moving parts to a proper moderation reporting system that it is a very interesting challenge.
Nice. I wanted to ask a little bit about the international component. So you mentioned how important the global player base was for kind of sparking the overall evolution of Among Us into a huge phenomenon. Is it still very international? And do you, when you're kind of managing this overall player community, do you interact with people all over the planet, or do you have people in different locations that are helping you with that aspect?
Yeah, so when it comes to just interacting with the community itself, I am the one handling the communication. Like if like, again, Twitter, TikTok, social media channels, let's say, if like, someone in Korea is talking about it, then I'm the one that sees it. And I'm like, all right, well, let's Google translate this for the best. Or, just like interacting with it. Emojis are great. Emojis are just a heart emoji, universal. It's lovely. That being said, it's like we do work with partners. So for example, in merch, like we have partners that work in Korea and in Latin America. And I think that's it for now. Maybe Europe. Anyways, and then we also have like a great partner with like Robot Teddy. They have some people that help us out with like the more international things as well. So while I am the one who like, let's say, will read a lot of the things that are happening online, like we still do have other partners that help us out with all the international things, because they are still a very large part of our player base. And it would be unfortunate to ignore them, because it doesn't matter if like you speak English or if you speak Korean or whatever. It's like, that's something that we want you to be a part of the community.
Right. So some of the people who are part of your community that you direct and manage and support are themselves celebrities with millions of people in their own communities, right? So you have these streamers, right, who are, many of whom are now like a big part of their identity, and their content is playing Among Us. How do you manage those relationships? Like, do they have like, are they a special issue for you or do they just like get folded into the larger community, or do you have a way of kind of dealing with these kind of VIP members?
So for like the bigger streamers and YouTubers, on the sheer amount of things that we need to do is, again, like we don't really do too many influencer relations. That being said, that doesn't mean that we're not in contact with them. Also, there have been like a bunch of streamers that have been in contact with us like just as we were slowly blowing up, and like we have like for example, like I see our CEO is in like some of the streamers' Discord because it's just like, oh, well, it was really cool when as we were blowing up in North America, like they believed in us and they were like, oh, like, hey, like join the Discord, let's talk. So it's really interesting. It's a really close relationship that I think we're all really thankful to have with a lot of streamers. And as new streamers pick it up, that's kind of where I kind of jump in. Is usually like, oh, like I'll definitely interact with them online and just chat with them. And it's kind of the thing where I think it's disingenuous and weird to think of it as like oh yeah, like I got another streamer with like 1 million followers to play our game. It's more like, hey, thank you so much for playing. It's still in our minds, it still sometimes feels like we're still like a tiny company that hasn't been discovered yet. So we're like, oh my god, thank you so much. Thank you so much for playing our game. So yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about merchandising, and occasionally you kind of get involved in those conversations. I have to imagine that the folks at Innersloth are being approached by people who want to do big kind of media crossover things, TV shows, movies, comic books, and things like that. Are you a part of those conversations? And in general, do you see yourself as one of the main people communicating about this, as having responsibility for the overall brand? Do you guys think about it in those terms?
Yeah, so one of the most important things when Innersloth was working and like blowing up, and like we were talking about our brand values and talking about what we wanted to do, one of the most important things, especially for the team, in order to like continue loving Among Us and everything it was that they didn't want to make Among Us basically like a walking billboard with a game slapped on top, right? It would be very easy to slap a bunch of logos into the game and be like, all right, we're done. Like, good job, everyone. Like, we've done it. So when it comes to like partners who approach us and whatever, one of the things that we always try to keep in mind is like, okay, is this actually a cool thing for the community and helps them like stay engaged and it's like just like an exciting thing for them? Or is it something that's just like, it would be a lazy like slap onto the game, like here's a logo, cool, and now we're done. And also like, just the team itself, like they didn't want to get, I think one of the traps that you could fall into is to get carried away by the hype and get like feel like you have all this pressure on you to deliver this one thing when what they were working on, like the passion that they had for it and the game design values that they had for the game need to stay intact in order for it to be, one, a game that they wanted to work on, and two, something where they didn't feel like, okay, just because like all these partners want to do cool things with Among Us, that we should automatically do it, because what matters first is the game and the community, and then everything else like comes into it.
So I know that there's certain things you probably can't talk about, but so there's no plans though for like an Among Us TV show, for example. Like that's not something that has been discussed or
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like it'd be cool.
It would be cool.
But like when you're like, I think the thing is like when you're just trying to get a new update out and you're like,
yeah,
let's just focus on one thing at a time. Because again, I think that's the problem of time, of just like, it would be really cool to do these things. Who knows?
It would be cool. You heard it here first, cool, folks.
I mean, it would be cool to have actually, if it were done well, specifically.
Yeah.
I've seen.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this, Victoria. Is social media just work for you now? I imagine like all of us, when you wake up, you want to scroll through Twitter before you have to get out of bed. Is that just like, okay, God, now you have to start your job first thing as your eyes open? Like, is there any part of social media that is somewhere you can just go where you aren't doing your job, where you can just kind of like kick back and doom scroll like a normal person?
That was a very non-answer. I don't know. I feel like it's the same thing of also like, game designers. It's like when you play a game, can you actually enjoy and relax and play the game, or are you analyzing the game? What are you doing? So for me, the thing is, it's like I genuinely love my job, and I genuinely like do not want to leave it. It is something that I want to do. It's something I want to continue doing. So while social media still will feel like a job sometimes, even when like I wake up and I check it and I'm like, ooh, like this is a really cool thing that they did. I wonder how I can do something similar. It is still something that I find enjoyment in, and that I will probably continue doing. That being said, I have certain accounts that like are purely just for me. For example, like I technically have an Instagram, but it's not public, and I will never set it public because then I'll try to like game the system and like try to get followers. No, just work on having fun with the platform.
That's good to hear. I'm going to name some social networks, and I just want you to give me kind of a yes or no, just a quick take on whether they have Among Us content on them. Like, are they part of this network that you pay attention to? So, I mean, Twitter, obviously. Twitter, yes. Okay. Instagram, is there Among Us stuff on Instagram? Like,
there is, but I'm not really posting I should post more on it. I'm being called out.
What about Facebook? Do you have to kind of scan Facebook? Is there Among Us stuff happening there?
I mean, yeah.
TikTok?
I have personal feelings about Facebook. TikTok, yes. TikTok is actually bigger than our Twitter.
Really? There's a ton of stuff. Okay. Clubhouse.
No, Clubhouse actually doesn't want brands on it yet.
Oh.
It's only individuals. Yeah.
I imagine there's still community, like Among Us community stuff happening.
I also don't have an Apple device, so I can't be on Clubhouse.
Reddit.
Yeah, we're on Reddit. Well, I mean, like I interact on Reddit. I'm not like posting that much.
Yeah. One of the things I always like to find out is where a person lives and where they grew up, whether that is like affects how they think about what they do, their job and their career. Where did you grow up, Victoria? I know you live in Montreal now, right?
Yes.
And where did you grow up?
In Vancouver.
In Vancouver? And do you think growing up in Canada has any like contributed to your ability to think about these issues, community and compassion and kindness and communication?
Is it because Canadians are so nice?
Canadians are nice. They do have that reputation. I apologize.
No, I mean, maybe I'm sure like, you know, the place where you grew up has changed, affects you in some way. But honestly, I think I would put a lot of the ways that I handle community and a lot of the ways that I handle a lot of how I understand community and my interactions from the fact that I grew up with like my parents were immigrants. They escaped like the Vietnam War. So when they came to Canada, like they didn't know a lot of English, all that kind of things. So even when I was a kid, right, like I was the one like deciphering like government documents for them, even though I had no idea what they were. I was like, okay, well, I understand it more than they do. So together, maybe we can try and figure this out. So so a lot of my community work, and I think a lot of the basis for it comes from the fact that I've had to do a lot of understanding, try to a lot of patience and deciphering of like between like English to Vietnamese, and also just, you know, figuring out, okay, I'm living in Canada, westernized world, whatever. But then I come from very different family values, and it's kind of getting that in between and figuring that weird space in the middle out that has helped me a lot with community work. Nice.
Do you ever just get to play games for fun and to relax? And if so, what games do you play?
I always feel bad when people ask me this because I'm like, oh God, games for fun. So very recently, I've gone back into Minesweeper, just like the classic Microsoft Minesweeper.
All
it's right. So good. I've never been a game in my life, and I am determined. I'm determined to one day beat a game of Minesweeper. So that's been my like latest obsession. But I do play like a few other games. I've recently played Gunfire Reborn, I guess. But I also end up usually like one of the things that I really love doing, and maybe it's because I love watching streams too, is like I have a friend and we'll often just like, well, they'll probably play a game and then I'll just sit and watch, and we'll kind of play the game and talk about it. So very recently we played Omori. He played Omori, I guess. And yeah, that was a very interesting game.
Nice. We have a ton of questions from the chat. So I think I'm going to shift gears and start to pull some of these questions out from the chat. Number one, I had a lot of excitement when you mentioned the great Discord pruning. There were several people, and Hangday and Clino Dev were saying they want to know the story. Clino Dev said, we stand the band queen. So I think you have a lot of support. But people want to hear a little bit, if you don't mind sharing, about what that process was like when you went in with a machete into the Among Us Discord.
Basically, like, yeah, got rid of so many people. Yeah, so basically the thing about having one, like, such a large Discord is that I genuinely don't think saying you have a Discord of 800,000 people sounds like a bragging right, and I don't think of it as one. I think it's a detriment if it is not handled properly. And I'm not saying it wasn't handled properly before, but just that it had like a lot of bulk in it, right? So a lot of the people who joined the Discord initially, because there's a gate in order to get in, like you have to verify yourself. They had just joined when the game was getting popular and never bothered verifying themselves and were just kind of sitting there, and they weren't allowing people who wanted to genuinely interact with the community and be a part of it and talk to the community and be a part of our Discord to, actually join, because the Discord server cap was at like 700,000, and so yet somehow we got to 800,000. So when I decided to come in, I was like, okay, what we're going to do is basically, with help from someone who built a bot, basically build a bot that kicks, prunes, whatever, a large majority of the people who basically have this one role that's assigned to them if they don't verify in time. And if they don't verify in time, they're being kicked out. And as we were like developing it, it's like, okay, well, we're kicking out like 70% of the Discord. And I was like, great, cool. He's like, are you sure you want to do that? That's a lot of people. I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter to me to have the numbers if we don't have the engagement, if we don't actually have that community feeling, because all that is just fluff. And I don't care about fluff.
Nice. Okay, here's another question. This is from Chris Williams. How do you come up with a brand voice that is authentic, especially when coming into an already established game?
Yeah, so the good thing, I guess, about coming into an established game was because they didn't really have a lot of community management going on anyway. They didn't have like a set brand voice necessarily. That being said, what I did before I joined the Innersloth team was I went to each of the developers' personal accounts and I just scrolled and I read how they talked. I read the kind of humor that they had with their fans. I saw like what they were interested in. And that's sort of something that I was like, okay, I'm going to take this into consideration. As for creating an authentic brand voice, it's something that usually will sort of align with your own personality and with your own brand, just because for me anyways, it is something that I'm like, I need to be able to consistently do this and not hate my life and not feel like gross when I try to use social media. So for me, it's like really keeping in mind all the values that you set forth, whether that's the company values or for me, I create brand values for the voice that we put out, sticking to those. And if you want, like I've seen a lot of people like work with themes, right? So like, for example, Darkest Dungeon has a very specific brand voice that is in line with the game itself. The Among Us one, less in line with the game just because it doesn't have a very strong narrative voice. So in that sense, it became like my own voice. And the thing is like with personalities, it's like you will always have your own little quirks that become the unique thing of your studio. And it's just your decision whether or not like you want it to be really sarcastic, whether or not you want it to be more positive, or you want it to be like artistic. It really could go either way.
Here's a question from the Squig Boss. Victoria, how are you still alive?
How are any of us still alive? Stay safe. Wash your hands. 6 feet apart. Anyways, no, I am still alive due to a number of things, right? One, I have so much gratefulness and like I'm blessed by the moderators within the Discord community for Among Us. I think moderators always deserve a lot of love. I have a great support system. I think the lovely thing about working in community management is that you often can reach out to any community manager and be like, hey, I kind of really need help right now. And they'll be like, hey, what's up? How can I help? There's no guarding or gatekeeping of secrets between community managers and like helping with a community, let's say. And also for me, honestly, just being able to take breaks that aren't involved in front of a computer, very important.
Yeah. When on one of your slides,
yes,
you have a little note about the AOC stream, and there was a lot of excitement in the chat. So Philantopia and a bunch of other people were talking about the AOC. You got to give us what can you tell us a little bit about just that moment? And I think you maybe played a little bit with AOC at one point. Is that true?
I did.
Just give us a little bit of what that's like.
It still doesn't feel real. So the thing about the AOC thing is that a lot of people are like, wow, how did you like get her to play? We're like, oh, we found out when everyone else found out. Like she just tweeted that out. So that was very surreal. It still is surreal. And then the second time around when AOC was playing with Jagmeet Singh, which is a Canadian politician, I got to hop on. And that was really fun. That being said, I was a nervous wreck. I was playing the game and I forgot how to do our own task. I was like, I was like staring at the task and I was like, I can't do this right now. Just left. And then I was too nervous to be the imposter. It was a lot of things, but over time it got like, I was like, okay, everything's fine. So I don't know. It was it's one of those things I think that doesn't hit you until after it happens. And then it doesn't feel real again because it's over. So
yeah. You know, it used to be said that if you're going to be president, that you should know how to play poker. There was something about the skills involved in reading other people, in making tough decisions with uncertain information, with being able to balance risk and reward, that those skills are really important. It's nice to see a new generation of people in public office who are playing these kinds of video games, right? I mean, I think that's just a nice thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because like still in like pop culture, right? Every time like the news picks up on games, you're like, wow, like who knew that games, like, you know, people were playing games when I think most of us know it's like games are very popular. A lot of people play them. Why is this still like a mystery to people that's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that there are games that people are playing.
So here's a question from Slathered Muffin. How do you balance keeping the Among Us community alive while still fostering creativity and developing new games?
Interesting. Well, we're not developing a new game currently. So
that's one answer. Yeah.
So that's one answer, right?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you mean by keeping the Among Us community alive, right? So it's one of those things where like we have 300 million active users, so they're still playing it. I think maybe like how we keep them engaged and how we keep them interested is like, you know, again, with the game updates, even though like, you know, they're like, oh, it's been a while since you had a game update. It's one of those things where it's like, that's okay, because there's still people that are playing the game and we're going to work our hardest for them regardless. And if they found another game that they love, great. A lot of games deserve a lot of love and we're very grateful for the stuff that we've had. But I think it's one, just knowing what game updates you have in mind, two, being transparent with the community and interacting with them and engaging with them and seeing what they want. And three, like, again, like that's kind of what my job is, to build a community that stays long-term, whether or not we're going to build a new game, whether or not we're going to stick with Among Us, like, what can I do to create this community that rallies around the studio and not just the game?
Here's a question from Chowjian Cool Beans. How many people play Among Us with strangers?
I actually don't know.
Yeah, like I'm curious about that because I guess there are different ways you can sort of set up a server and play Among Us with, you know, all the people, or you can just do. Is there a kind of solo queue?
Yeah, so you can play like a private lobby. So you invite your friends online into a private or local, but I don't think a lot of people.
That's the way I've always played it.
Yeah, a lot of people play it with a private service.
Just are playing it with people they don't even know, right? Yeah. Yeah,
a ton of people play it with people that they don't know in the public servers, to the point where like sometimes when you click into a public server that seems open, it's like, sorry, you can't join because it like has already filled up. So yeah, definitely a bunch of people, because I doubt that 300 million active users are all playing in private lobbies.
Yeah.
But I don't have the like exact metric for it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Here's a question from literally Tobbs. Hi, Victoria. I'm a student and work in the industry. In the coming months, my game will launch on the Epic Game Store. Is there anything I can do to prepare myself mentally for potentially blowing up? I am a CM and also the most public visible face of the company. Thank you so much for this talk, by the way. Heart emoji.
Aw, congrats on the game launching on Epic Game Store in a month. That's exciting. Yeah, so I think one of the things is to have, for me, when I would do this for, like, let's say Kitfox, for example, is to have a contingency plan for if the game doesn't do very well. Like there's a scale basically I put. So worst case scenario, game like sells like 5 copies, and you're like, all right, so what am I going to do with that? Bad case scenario, it's like, it didn't make that much, whatever. Middle scenario, we made the amount of copies was sold, we made the money back, cool, made a little bit of profit, then we blow up. There's like this sliding scale, right? So when it comes to games like blowing up, you need to kind of figure out the context for that, right? I mean, maybe the game will blow up as much as Among Us, but again, like, that's a very rare occurrence, and that's not something, to necessarily bank on. But in order to mentally prepare for like a game for success or whatever, is to, again, this is why I think brand values, even though they sound like so like, oh, like who cares about brand values? Who cares about your company voice, whatever? It is the thing that will ground you no matter what happens. If something terrible happens, if something very good happens, having something written and that you can refer back to is something that I think has really been able like to ground me and to make me remember my own priorities. That being said, for things that are blowing up, like you always want to make sure that you're over prepared. That's what I do anyway. It's like moderation up, like just everything's up. Making sure that things are on lockdown, making sure that, who knows, like devs don't have like personal information floating around on the internet, and making sure that's handled. And also making sure that you yourself like have slept the day before the game launch. I think that is very important. Yeah, so it's a very contextual answer, so I'm not really sure how to handle it. Hopefully it does do really well though.
Alderwin asks, how do you balance using community content like mods and fan art versus creating your own?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a toss-up. A sort of unofficial, very unofficial loose rule I go with is like, one day I will post our own content, the second day I will retweet a fan art thing. That's kind of like the loose thing, just because the community like obviously does so much amazing work. That being said, it all depends on like, do we have an announcement coming up? Do I have something that is timely and would make sense? Like memes move super fast, so maybe I have to do it this day. But yeah, I do sort of the like 50-50 rule in terms of like fan art and my own stuff, but it changes.
Great. Dandy After Hours asks, what is your opinion on TikTok for community engagement and content creation? And will you be bringing your chaotic energy TikToks to the Among Us Twitter anytime soon?
Oh God. Okay, so they know about my chaotic TikToks. Yeah, so I find TikTok an extremely valuable tool for community engagement and also just appealing to a different audience. I think one of the things about game dev Twitter, even though I love like, I love Twitter, I'm obviously there a lot, and I love using the Among Us Games account for Twitter and whatnot. I think a lot of the times, especially when it comes to indie, oftentimes we end up marketing to other indie game devs or to other game developers, and we don't get out of that kind of bubble of people checking hashtag game dev or something. Not that I don't think anyone, maybe they do check hashtag game dev, but I digress. I think one of the things that's interesting about TikTok is that a lot of users on TikTok, one, are a different demographic, but two, don't have Twitter, right? I know this also because like before I joined games, I thought Twitter was dead. I was like, who even uses Twitter anymore? No one uses Twitter. This platform is gonna fail. And then I joined game industry and I was like, oh, I guess I have to be on Twitter now. So it's really honestly like TikTok or any other social media platform, any other platform you can get away from the one that you typically go on to can be very useful in terms of getting a different audience.
Here's a question from Carol Mertz. who asks, what other unexpected challenges did you encounter when transitioning from the smaller community at Kitfox to the larger Innersloth community, or valuable and universal lessons you were able to carry over?
Oh, that's a good question.
Good question.
Yeah. So one of the, I guess what I really liked about moving on from like Kitfox to Among Us is like, yeah, testing what worked and what didn't. I'm pleased to say that the whole values thing that I like base a lot of my work on still works, especially because I think I have gotten like flack from people being like, oh, it's just like all talk about like, oh, be kind and doesn't actually mean anything. No, it does. So there's that. But also I think this is a thing that some indie devs can do depending on what you consider indie, right? So the fact that Innersloth is just a team of 5, the fact that Kitfox was just a team of 8, people tend to be more understanding when it is a little bit of a smaller development team, because you get that more direct interaction. And that is what made me like, okay, so this whole like direct interaction team when it comes to being an indie game developer is very important to the community and in terms of like interacting with them and their understanding of the game. Other kind of like lessons that really worked out well, I think, is the fact that you can, I don't know, it's going to sound kind of weird, but you can bring a very certain voice into your game or your studio or your work and still have it be something that people latch onto. And also, no matter what, someone's going to hate it. Some people hated my voice on Kitfox. Some people hate my voice on Among Us. You can't please everyone. And that is just something that is very important to remember too.
Here's a question from It's a Kangasaur. Hi, Victoria. I have a question about the language options in the game. How did you choose them? Are you planning to add more translations of Among Us in the near future? And if so, which ones take the highest priority?
Yeah, so the ways that we kind of decide on which languages, it's like, you know, there's, you often can have demographic info of like, where's your game being played? The biggest places, probably we want to translate the game there just because it would be very helpful. Though we do have like, I think we're like going to add like 14, 12 languages. I forgot the exact number. We do want to add more languages. I can't say which ones yet, just because again, like in terms of like the list of tasks that we have, it's not really something we've really decided on yet because we have so many other things to do.
Here is a question from Poshy Posh Lad. Hi, Victoria. I'm Rocco Wu. With Among Us mods becoming more prevalent recently, what is your take on the modding community in relationship to the intellectual property of Among Us?
Cool. There's the things where it's like we also just want to be careful. Like there's, I would say like, there's still like, I think like the thing I would always caution with like anything is like, you know, make sure you're actually downloading an okay thing, not a virus, that sort of thing. But no, it's cool to see the creativity of the community.
Here's a question from Robin Gang or Robin Gan. Is there a community around a game apart from Among Us that you especially like or adore or admire?
Oh, so many. Okay. I'm like, which one? How do I narrow it down? Okay, well, I mean, I did mention Darkest Dungeon. I do like the Darkest Dungeon community. I think that's really cool. I think I've seen the community around co-op who are making Goodbye Volcano High is really nice. Biased, but the Kitfox community I like, and the Dwarf Fortress community, honestly, because that was like a whole community that I had to adapt to, and getting to know them and seeing like just the like legacy of the game itself and the people who have been playing it for so long. Incredible, amazing. And the fact that they always want to help each other out. Love it. That is, I learned a lot from the Dwarf Fortress community that I think I brought onto the Among Us community, honestly. And kind of the ways that Tarn, the developer, talked to the community very transparently was something that I learned a lot from. What else is there? Oh, there's so many games. Oh, the Going Under team. I could list things.
What's the Minesweeper community like? I imagine some mostly older people.
I don't No, that's actually what I was thinking about. I'm like, how do I find the Minesweeper community? Where are their forums? Where's their Discord?
One. Yeah.
How can like I need to find them. That's my next goal.
There's gotta be a Minesweeper community
there,
out there. Yeah.
There has to be a mine. Can I join? Can I be a part of this?
Intense too, right?
I know. Maybe I have to.
Super intense.
Maybe I have to beat a game of Minesweeper before like the gates open to me.
Yes. Yeah. It's like getting over it. You have to beat it. Well, I would. That's a secret, I should say. Okay. So Hangday has a question. How many submods does the Discord have, and what's the process for selection and onboarding?
So I haven't actually been a part of the selection and onboarding for the mods, though I'll probably want some more in the future, and that will be a whole other process. But right now, oh my gosh, how many do we have? I think we have like 20 to 25 mods. And they're split up into voice chat mods, general like moderators, and senior mods. Maybe, yeah. I think, yeah, that's around the range of how many we have, I believe. And yeah, that's kind of the way they did it. When they were recruiting mods, they had like a whole application process, but I don't know if we'll do that next time because it literally took them months to go through it.
There's a question from Snakes Andrews, who is Blake Andrews. I don't know if you know Blake. They have a show with David Jaffe that they do. It's very popular on a chat show.
Yes.
And they ask, what are Victoria's Among Us strats?
Bold of you to assume I have strats. So here's the thing. I'm terrible at Among Us. I am terrible at our own game. To the point where one time I was playing with the team and like some other people, and I was the imposter. And our CEO/programmer, Forrest, he was like, I think the imposter is Victoria because no one is dying. Like this is such a slow game. I think it's Victoria. And I was like, damn it. How does he know? I'm really bad at the game.
CJ Kirshner asks, how do you balance interacting with players on the dev side as data points or metrics versus on the public front as human beings?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting question. So I never actually, when you're interacting with the community, like engaging with them, I never think of it as a data point. The way that the data happens is in the backend. That's like when I go into like my social media tools and I like extract the data and do all of that. But I'm never doing that like all at once, right? Those are like very separate days. So when I'm interacting with the community itself, I'm honestly not trying to figure out like, who is this person? What are they all about? Where do they live? What's their age? What's their like gender? None of that. It's more just like having fun with them and playing off of like anything that they say and enjoying just interacting with the community. And then like if we were to need stats or if I were to need to pull up a report, that's when you go into the back end and then you just kind of work there. But I tried, I don't try to like put people into like stats and then be like, all right, we're good.
Nice. Robin Gann asks, do you have any insights into why Among Us blew up?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a mixture of several things, right? So, partially luck and the things that I talked about in the beginning of streamers, overseas popularity, all of that kind of thing. But also the reason I think it's blown up is one, crossplay between PC, Nintendo Switch, but also mobile. Like the thing about it being on mobile, I think is a really big thing, and free on mobile with ads. Because it means like, this is why like the kids could download it, or teachers could download it, or literally anyone could kind of download it and be able to play with someone like who has a PC or who has a Nintendo Switch. That just opens up a whole area of opportunity. Like it comes with its own problems right now. You need a port to all the mobile devices. But the fact that everyone usually has a smartphone makes a big difference. Also, obviously, price point, that sort of thing. And then the pandemic, people looking for ways to connect with each other and to have bigger groups of people playing, right? So normally you're like, okay, so you either have giant MMO that would require quite a beefy rig, let's say, to play, or you have like a local co-op game potentially, or maybe Jackbox. Jackbox is great too. But Among Us was like the 10-player lobbies, like, okay, you can get a sizable amount of people in here talk to them, have a place of interaction, that sort of thing.
And I think we just have a few more questions. Are you okay for a few more minutes?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, good. So we've got you here for a while, but I want to ask just a couple more here. Here's a question from Julie Waves. Hi, Victoria. I'm a student who just joined a team of indie devs as their first community manager. Do you have any advice for building community and socials for an unreleased game that really depends on a multiplayer audience? I've read all your articles on Twitter and they've been super helpful, but just wondering if you have any more tips.
Yeah, so this is going to be a very difficult thing, right? So that's like the $1 million question for any indie studio. It's like, hey, I have a game. How do I promote it? And how do I gain a community? But it's not out yet. I'm going to assume like a trailer is already out or something. But when it comes to building your game's community, and if it's an indie game with multiplayer, usually the thing that they say is that you should have some sort of a single player mode that's fun to play. I say this knowing that Among Us does not really have a single player mode. So just putting that out there. But that is the kind of thing that I've heard. But when it comes to trying to build your community, it's definitely knowing who you're pitching to and who you're trying to appeal to. So when I was working at Kitfox, it was like, okay, so we saved a lot of information and we held a lot of things back from the community so that we could wait until we had like a big announcement that we could pitch to press first as like, hey, do you want an exclusive? Or like, hey, can we be a part of this event or this, can you provide us with any marketing? Because like, we'll have this big announcement that you could be like, the first one to talk about. And that was sort of the appeal of getting like us onto like a bigger platform potentially, and also, getting those eyes and those faces and wish lists or whatever for our game. Yeah, it's again, one of those difficult things. It's finding the other communities elsewhere. So not necessarily on Twitter, exploring what other kind of options, whether that is on like Reddit, TikTok, etc. It's going to be a lot. And definitely like, and also sometimes working with other indie studios just to be like, hey, like, let's help each other out. Like that is a thing. Like sometimes like a little cameo in each other's game has been a thing that Kitfox has done, all that sort of stuff.
Here's a question from Glow Up Mitu, which is the Game Center's own Mitu Kandekar, part of our core faculty here at the Game Center. One of the exciting things about your role is that you have real say in shaping things at Innersloth, and you're an important stakeholder. It seems that with community management being a relatively new role in game dev, this isn't always the case, though. What advice do you have for either community managers themselves or game studio owners to make sure that they have a real voice as part of the team?
Yeah, and that's a wonderful question. I'm glad you asked it. Community managers don't get usually a lot of say, or, I think there's a certain subset of people who are like, community management is just tweeting, you're just having fun, whatever. And I do think that is a very wrong thing to have. And I wouldn't say like necessarily like community managers definitely like need to be able to understand how to convey the needs of the community to the dev team. That's sort of part of the job, obviously, and also understanding like you need to have a vague understanding of how game development works to kind of help you better pitch your ideas and basically form whatever the community is trying to yell at you into a cohesive sentence to tell the dev team. That being said, so for people who own studios, who manage the community managers, whatever. One is like showing the respect, obviously, that you would show anyone that was working in tech, and both like, emotionally and financially. Like that is definitely a thing that needs to happen. But two, knowing that community managers are the people that are your front line, but also are the people that are part of the community and understand the needs that they have. And if you want to have a sustainable, positive, healthy community for the years to come, it's like it would do well for you to give the community managers a space to talk, whether that is during a certain meeting that you have together, like for example, like a design meeting, or like a postmortem, or not postmortem, during sprint reviews, or during however you set up your project management, having a space for the community manager to talk and encouraging them to, because I have met a lot of community managers, unfortunately, who have been in very bad situations, and they are a little bit more afraid to speak up. So being able to give that space to them, I think would be very useful.
Nice. Okay, final question from the Squig Boss. On total gut instinct, which color is the most sus?
I personally, honestly, I would say brown, because my main color is brown. And I think everyone just forgets about it. They're like, right, who cares about it? Everyone expects like a color like red or like, no, it's definitely brown. Yeah. I think it's
all right. Victoria, thank you so much. I wanna thank our sponsors, Fresh Planet, Take-Two, Empire State Development, Parsec. I want to thank the chat, everyone who came to the event. Great questions. The discourse is coming back. The discourse is coming back, people. Soon. Victoria, this was lovely. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you will come back again soon.
Yeah, no, I'm honored to have been here. Chat was great. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk about community.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, and good night.